Come on in. I have a lot of note takers wanting to come. What's our take on this?
I don't need that. Let's not,
I don't need that either.
I
All right.
think.
They're probably going to sell all our genius. Hi, everyone. I don't
They're
want.
hard to know. They like auto join and you don't know it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Okay, so I
interesting.
won't
Yeah.
I
Well,
won't
we can,
report them.
no, don't report
Let's
them, but kick them out.
well, ironically, in a moment, hang on, remove. In a moment, I'm gonna literally just make there be no waiting room because I don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
Um, Hello, everyone. It is great to see none of your faces, but just your icons, except for Donna
Donna.
Peterson. Donna, come on down. Hi, Donna. Thanks for joining us. Everyone else, hold please. Yes, Steve. Steve's waving. Hi, Steve. Now some
Listen, keep
host
that cam off. It's
tools.
totally fine.
Yeah, this is lunchtime for many, well, or breakfast, depending on your time
It's
zone.
I am caffeinating.
Look at
Angie.
this. Angie's here. Patricia's having lunch. Bon appetit. Lindsay's here. Hi.
I have a
Oh, it's
friend
getting fun.
who she and I would regularly have lunch meetings together, and she would actually like really like when my camera was on, so that she could watch me eat lunch. So that was like our
Yeah,
thing. It was her little quirk, you know?
it's like a little camaraderie. Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
going out to lunch.
yeah, exactly.
Um, okay, so I think, what do you think, Evelyn? People are in, so we know they've been able to get in, and the waiting room is off, so they keep coming and they can see us. Amy Lemon, hello. Oh my God, everyone's here. Amy, can you just give me a visual thumbs up? Can you see both me and Evelyn right now? Anybody? Can anybody see?
We
Ryan
see.
Ross
There we
is here.
go.
Yeah.
There, we got thumbs.
Okay.
We got thumbs.
Incredible. Oh my God. What a team. This feels kind of like a wedding. We're not getting married, but I feel like it's like
Are
my people
we?
and your people.
Let's.
Hey, listen,
I
somebody
know.
here
It's
is
like,
probably
which
ordained.
side of the church are you sitting on? Or like, whatever. It's like, but we're all
No,
family here, so just take a seat.
we're all working on being unbiased family. All right, let us jump in. So everybody, we're going to start because this is recorded. And so there are some folks that are just not able to make the whole thing, or maybe are just going to watch it later. But I want to be mindful of your time. I really thank you for coming for a whole hour in the middle of your day, regardless of what time zone you're in. My name is Jen Dary. I run a leadership coaching and consulting firm called Plucky. And I am so juiced to have Dr. Evelyn Carter here about her new book today. And we know each other through the Plucky world. We'll talk a tiny bit more about that. But in short, Evelyn took a manager training with me a number of years ago. And I've kept in touch with her to watch her trajectory career wise have so many, not only like the trajectory rising, but also cool twists and turns. And most definitely, this book is the latest one of those. So, Evelyn, I'm going to intro you and then you can wave and do whatever you need to do to say hi. Okay, everyone, let's welcome Dr. Evelyn Carter, who is a social psychologist, diversity, equity, and inclusion expert, and the author of Was That Racist? Her work translates research insights into practical tools for discussing and dismantling racial bias. She has applied these evidence based practices at organizations of all shapes and sizes, and her work has been featured in peer reviewed and popular press outlets alike. Dr. Carter is a proud So Now You're a Manager, it's a Plucky class, alumna, lover of all things purple, and she will happily tell you about her favorite study. Hello, Evelyn. Welcome.
Hello, Jen. Thank you for having me.
Oh my
And hi,
goodness.
everyone.
You,
There's like some cool, uh, like
I
clap
know.
explosions happening. I love
I,
that. So
I
yeah.
don't know how these kids do it these days. I can literally, I have many talents, but Zoom fostering beyond a meeting of like 10 is really keeping me up at night. Um, all right. So before Evelyn's going to read for us in a minute, for a couple minutes from her book. But before she jumps into that, I'm going to just post in chat a couple of basic definitions because I think sometimes when you read from this work or do this work, it's good to sort of set the context. So from Evelyn's book, I want to read two definitions. The first is racial bias. So Evelyn defines this as an inclination for or against any racial group that influences how we think, feel, and act toward them. And then her definition of racism is what happens when an inclination against a marginalized racial group proceeds in a manner that upholds a system of white supremacy. So I think it's good just to kind of ground us.
Yeah.
You want to read us something?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really
Great.
appreciate you starting with those definitions because, as I say in my introduction, where I use those definitions, and like there are reasonable people who would disagree about how I'm defining these things, but it's important to know the definitions that I'm using as we go forward in this book, and certainly as we have this conversation today.
Yeah.
I also just want to quickly say hello to all of you that are here. It is like a wedding in that it's, kind of merging of our worlds, and also there are people the internet is a wonderful place, which is like maybe a controversial statement, but it really is a wonderful place. And there are people that I literally have never met in person, but only have met thanks to the wonderfulness of the internet who are here. And so that's really cool. So yeah, I'm just thrilled to be here with all of you. Yeah, and hi, Ten. I don't know you either, but we're going to be buddies now. All right, so I'm going to read to you from my book, Was That Racist? How to Detect, Interrupt, and Unlearn Bias in Everyday Life. And the passage I picked is from chapter 2, which talks about the power of discomfort. But given the conversation today and Jen Plucky's kind of focus as a leadership and manager training kind of consulting firm, I thought talking about reading one of my experiences working with a company, a tech company, would be helpful. So this is from chapter 2 of my book. All right. It was February 2020, and I was working with one of my long-term clients on the next iteration of our partnership, having spent the previous year leading unconscious bias workshops for their global organization of approximately 5,000 employees. This was a tech company with employee demographics quite familiar to me, mostly male, mostly white and Asian, and I had observed the consequences of this nearly blanket homogeneity during our workshops. After 2 hours of dynamic and meaningful dialogues about strategies attendees could use to mitigate their own personal biases, the one or two Black people in attendance would inevitably approach me, thank me for my work, and ask, with skepticism in their voices but pleading in their eyes, what will happen next? I'd share my genuine hope for their organization's continued transformation. Their employer was doing the work, I assured them, and they were. The unconscious bias education rollout had gone incredibly well, helping employees understand the negative impact of their biases, racial and otherwise. Questions had shifted from, how do you know I'm biased? I'm a caring person, to the more self aware, I think I've committed a microaggression. What do I do now? Employees were genuinely eager to know what actions they could take to foster a more inclusive environment, and company leadership seemed committed to this next chapter in our partnership, which we agreed would involve my working with the company's learning and development team and its newly hired DEI executive to develop workshop content on allyship that would suit their learning goals. I drafted a project plan like the one we'd used for previous work together, 2 to 3 rounds of content revisions, pilot sessions, and a cascading delivery plan beginning with the executive team. We got approval from the stakeholders involved and set a generous timeline for the workshop launch at the end of April. A few weeks into development, it became clear that this project would be anything but typical. For one thing, the list of stakeholders involved began to balloon. Every few days, my client contacts would send me the name of yet another leader who wanted to preview the deck we planned to use. Through several hour-long meetings, groups of people I had never met pored over the deck slide by slide, requesting wording changes on each one. I was asked to craft as close to a verbatim script as possible, and when the newly involved stakeholders learned that workshop facilitators typically shared personal stories, I was asked to collect them for advance approval. Eventually, whole sections of the workshop were up for discussion. Stakeholders were worried that the concept of privilege, a special right, advantage, or immunity granted to a person or group because of their identity, would alienate white people and suggested we omit the topic. Given that allyship is specifically about how people need to use their privilege to foster equity, this was impossible, I explained as clearly and kindly as I could, using plenty of research and case studies to back myself up. But no level of detail, explanation, or empirical justification seemed to be enough. I stood by while people who were neither DEI subject matter experts nor facilitators in any regard modified the content beyond recognition. After weeks of meetings, back and forth emails, and postponed start dates of the rollout, my partners on the DEI team came back to me. They were flabbergasted and apologetic for all the hoops I had been asked to jump through already. With deep, tired breaths, they let me know of one more coming my way. The Chief Human Resources Officer, a white woman to whom the DEI leader reported, wanted to meet. She and other company leaders were apprehensive about making white employees uncomfortable during the workshop. Instead of scheduling another meeting, she proposed that the most effective way to secure final approval from the leaders was through the company's usual method for presenting ideas, a memo. Never mind that in the 18 months of working with this client, the word memo had never emerged from any of my collaborators' mouths. So, in April of 2020, I drafted an 8-page, single-spaced memo for the company's executives. I still have this memo, by the way. It traced the DEI journey their organization had been on and highlighted my company's involvement in guiding this transformation. It connected the organization's public-facing values, values established by some of the very people I was writing to the themes of the proposed allyship workshop. It even identified how the values in action behaviors that were embedded in employee messaging from onboarding onward informed the content of the work would be underscored in the workshop. I summarized the research, some of which I had personally conducted, that informed the content of the workshop. I also emphasized how thoughtfully we designed the workshop's flow to build trust and psychological safety for attendees, even as they might grapple with this discomfort. I noted that centering white comfort at the expense of a real discussion about the impact of bias on people from marginalized groups was exactly what the allyship workshop was designed to prevent. It was difficult to translate everything I would typically say in a real-time dialogue into a written document, a difficulty compounded by the fact that neither I nor the DEI leader would be in the room as the topic was discussed among leadership. The chief HR officer was the only person with enough context to answer any questions that might be raised, and we hoped to advocate for this work. We set a new launch date for the last week of May and crossed our fingers that the memo would sway minds and maybe even touch a heartstring. But after a too brief interim came a reply. The company's leaders wanted more time to get comfortable with the idea of the content. Comfort, I was beginning to believe, was one of the company's real core values, and they asked us to postpone the launch again until the end of June. And then, on May 25th, 2020, George Floyd was murdered. I generally cringe when I hear people talk about the racial reckoning of the summer of 2020. People point to George Floyd's murder as a turning point, as the moment America woke up to the racial injustice and anti-Blackness that's so deeply ingrained in our national DNA, failing to acknowledge that many of us were quite awake to this injustice already. And yet, working as a DEI consultant throughout that summer, I witnessed firsthand just how transformative that pivotal moment was for some people.
Thank you so much, Evelyn. For those of you who don't yet have the book and who haven't read this, everything about the book is very Evelyn in that it is very smart, very well researched, and just has complete personality. So her anecdotes are charming. I totally recognize some of her workplace stories for sure, but she's going to bring like legit as well as personality. So I think it's just such a great I don't know, launch pad for our conversation. So for everybody else here, I have a few questions for Evelyn we're going to walk through, but then I'm definitely going to save some time at the end. So I don't know how many people are here, 27 people. So like think about your question and then maybe we'll be able to like allow you to ask it live, or we can always just refer back to comment section as needed. All right. So Evelyn, this magical day happens 2 years ago, 2024. Hachette picks you as the winner of a contest for this incredible sounding book. And now, because the publishing industry is what it is, 2 years later, the baby has arrived, the book is here. But a lot has changed in the world in 2 years. And I'm wondering, well, from your seat, like what has changed in terms of the receptivity to the book, the way you're marketing this, and how you're finding workplaces open or not to your message here?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that has changed about the reception to this book is that I literally had people when I told them about this award and the book that I was writing, in February 2024, they're like, oh my gosh, we can't wait to have you come to our company, right? There were chief diversity officers at organizations all around the country and the world who were like, oh yeah, it's going to be great. We're going to do a bulk order. We're going to have you come and do a keynote for our organization. And I mean, I would say there have been crickets since then, but really what is more accurate is that the people who were in those chief diversity officer roles no longer have their roles because um, their companies have gone in a different direction. And so that's been interesting, right? The corporate bulk buy pathway for my book has, I mean, dried up completely. Um,
Mhm.
and so that's been frustrating in some ways. There was a company that I worked for that had said one of these things, right? They're like, oh, we're excited to have you come. We'll do a book order, whatever. And to their credit, they had me come do a fireside chat um, with the DEI team that I also worked on. That was 5 people, including my boss and me. That was
To teach the
moderated.
DEI team all
That was
this
moderated by
new
one of the people
content.
who was
Oh
on the
boy.
team.
Oh boy.
Um, and I will never forget looking at the like agenda for because it was during our team retreat and I had like a little fireside chat, 30 minutes. And they didn't even put the main title of my book on the agenda. So it was not Fireside Chat with Dr. Evelyn Carter, author of Was That Racist? It was Fireside Chat on how to detect, interrupt, and unlearn bias in everyday life. Which, like,
Mm.
that is the subtitle of my book. But Was That Racist is pretty important as the main, I mean, literally, like, look at this cover. Um, and so I think that that's actually a perfect example, right? Like this company still wanted the credit for being like, yeah, we had you come do a fireside chat, but it was nowhere near as impactful as what they had originally described, and they didn't even put my actual title on the agenda for the conversation. That said, I have long had the feeling that, corporations are not the places that we should be looking to, especially not in late stage capitalism. Like it's just not going to happen. But I believe in the people who comprise the employees of those organizations. And so my marketing strategy has changed completely. I'm not going after the like listen, if you run a big company and you happen to be on here and you want me to come and do a fireside chat, or come
ET
and do a
from hell.
keynote and pay me, sign me up. I'm there, right? I like talking. I like money. Late stage capitalism. But I've more focused on like how do I reach the everyday consumer, the folks like those of you who are on this call? How do I use my network through wonderful folks like you, Jen, right, to reach people and be like, listen, we got 27 people on this call right now. Let's talk about racism because y'all are here. And I really am excited by the way that this book and kind of my shift from going toward the corporations and really just going to the people has allowed me to make connections with people that I wouldn't have otherwise. And it's also pushed me to do some interesting things. So I have been kind of exploring social media in new ways. I've been on TikTok, just, letting my quirks be all the way out and, just trying to find people there. And every time I post a video, I get, at least 3 people who are, yes, I was trying to not say the other thing, Angie, so thank you. Yes, I let my Evelyn flag fly. Uh, and, I get people who are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to check out your book at the library. Or this past week, my book was published, it was released in Australia. And so I went on Threads and I tagged Australia Threads and I was like, hey, I live in Long Beach, California. If you're in Australia, can you go to a bookstore and see my book and take a picture of it and send it to me? And people did, right? So I don't need corporations. I need your money. Give me your money. But I
Yeah.
like the people. It's the people. So that's what's been different. It has pushed me.
Mhm.
Yes, indie bookstores. I love going to those. Whenever I'm traveling, I hit up different cities. I go in, I sign books. So yeah, I'm trying all different kinds of things, and it's been fun to stretch that new muscle and to learn those new skills.
Well, props to you for pivoting. I mean, I'm not surprised at all that you're able to do it. And I love the creativity that you're bringing to it. And well, let's rethink the audience, burn it down, and take it by the individual because I resonate so much with that. I don't know if this will resonate with you, but some of you on the call know that I had my book came out actually like within a week of Evelyn. We were like
Yes. We are like book sisters in so many ways.
co-moms.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I told my publicist, like, listen, we're gonna light many little candles, not one big fire.
Yep.
And so that might be also kind of applicable for you here. I don't want to like continue with our like modern depression about the state of the world, although we could all be there. But I have one more question, sort of, I don't know, in that same vein, which is that this book is like so freaking well researched. There's a huge notes section in the back, there's like little numbers and footnotes all over the place. But we are living in a time when people are really fake newsy and not necessarily in here or in it for the facts. And I'm wondering, like, what is it like to release this book there, or where are you seeing resonance or not that is surprising you?
Yeah. So first of all, I love that you mentioned the end notes. I love the end notes very much. There were footnotes when I was writing the chapters, but this is how my
Mm,
publisher publishes things.
right.
And so there are lots of citations back there, but there are also some little like snarky, kind of asides, and also a love letter to doulas in chapter 5 that literally my editor was like, "This is a little long," and I was like, "I know, but I love my doula and I love doulas in general. They just do so much for us and for Black women in particular, at keeping us safe through childbirth." Okay, so give me your question again because I was like, "Oh, end notes, distracted."
No, you're fine. You're fine. Just like that, you're putting some real shit out to
Oh
people
yeah.
that don't believe facts anymore.
So, I do not care about the people. I don't care about reaching the people who don't believe in the facts. I think that there are many people for whom that is their lane, and I love that for them. That's not mine. My lane is to help empower people who know that what's happening right now is not right, who want to be advocates for racial justice and for equity and for inclusion in the workplace and in our world, but might not have the language or the knowledge to point to say why what they believe is the right thing to believe, right? And so my book
Mhm.
is really for folks who are like, yeah, I get this. How do I explain it to somebody else? So there was a review that I got that somebody said, this book is fantastic. Thanks. They said, like, I was in a difficult conversation with somebody about racism, and I actually was able to use one of the anecdotes from the book to explain it to this person. And they're like, oh, I get it. Right. So I want
Mm.
people who are both kind of on the like middle stage of their learning journey to find this book and be like, oh, now I really understand even more. I also want people who are on board with this concept but need help explaining it to others to feel it. I want DEI practitioners who are tired to read it and feel seen. So
Mhm.
that to, if people don't want to listen to the facts, I just saw, oh gosh, there was somebody who uh, was talking about the genocide in Gaza, and I saw this post, and he was like, "I'm not debating whether it's a genocide or not. Like, there are people who have said it is, like, there are organizations have said it, whatever." Um, and the same way that I don't debate flat earthers because why? And I like my
Mm.
personal kind of thing is I don't debate with strangers on the internet, but I certainly also like I'm not going to engage in a conversation with you if
Mhm.
you are just too passionate about not paying attention to the facts and to the evidence, right? There's no amount of evidence that's going to convince you. Why waste my breath?
Mhm. Well, your breath is very well used in this book, and you're kind of walking into a space that like, there's this framing that I love that Evelyn writes about, which is the difference between um, deciding or desiring to interrupt bias from an intrinsic reason versus an extrinsic reason. So, like, did somebody tell me you shouldn't be biased, or is there something inside me that is my values, my morals, my ethics that suggest that yes, I should do this work for that reason? Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I really like that distinction because in the research, there are a lot of studies about just like the power of intrinsic motivation for long-lasting behavior change. And one of the things that I like to do in my book, and when I'm talking about DEI related topics in general, is to bring in examples that are outside of the realm of DEI to kind of help disarm people and then show how it applies. So, in that same vein, right? Like we've all had the experience where we're trying to learn a new skill, and or pick up a new habit. So for me, I was really interested in walking more regularly and just getting more physical movement, and I needed some kind of nudging to do this. And so I started, my mom and my sister had a practice of texting each other a picture every time they had done a workout. And so I was like, I'm going to join that practice because that'll help with the accountability, right? Because I know that like if I haven't sent a picture of myself walking or like, after my workout, then it's like I'm gonna feel that.
Shame.
The exactly. And that can be very effective because it'll just like keep me going. But what research shows is that while that external pressure is useful for kind of essentially getting you to put on your shoes and get out the door, it's not going to sustain you when things get hard. And what you need
Mm.
is that internal, why am I here? So for walking, I didn't really encounter many challenges with like, why was this hard? And eventually I was just like, oh, I feel good. Like that was enough, right? But when you're talking about racism, especially if you're a white person who is having these conversations, you are probably not going to feel good most of the time. And
Mm.
so somebody telling you that you need to sit down and have a conversation about racism because they said so is really not going to be enough to get you to stick it out. So intrinsic motivation, finding that why is really important. And one of my favorite things to do with my clients and with anybody that I'm talking to is help them figure out that why. And that has been really cool. I talk about this in my book. Like some of my favorite conversations during that summer of 2020 were with people who were parents, typically who were boomers who had kids that were my age or a little bit younger than boomers, so kind of like that middle in between Gen X and boomer generation that had teenagers or kids in their 20s. And they were like, Evelyn, my kid keeps saying I'm racist.
Mm.
I I don't know why my kid thinks I'm racist. And they didn't understand why their 17-year-old was telling them that they were racist, but they knew that they did not want their kid to think that about them. And that
Mm.
was the catalyst that they needed to sit with their discomfort and understand how they were upholding racism in their everyday lives. I also really enjoy working with folks who are spiritual or religious kind of in any denomination or religious practice. But basically, every religious practice has the goal of like being a good person and like taking care of people in the world, right? And so I
Yeah.
love talking to people who are like, I realized that I wasn't being a good Christian because I wasn't combating racism. And so I love, for example, my book release party was at a church that identifies very much with the mission of the church being to uphold justice for the marginalized and to make this world a better place in everything that they do. And so yeah, I think intrinsic motivation is so important. I'm okay with, it being, like you have to be here because your manager told you to sit down for this training or whatever, but like eventually, if we're going to stick with it, you got to find the why that comes from within.
I mean, people are saying that it resonates in comments, and it really resonates for me too. And most of my work is working with leaders or managers or people moving in that direction. And I think that the framing of, are you doing this for internal purpose or external pressure, really shows up when I work with a lot of middle managers. So
Yeah.
they are this sandwich between the executives who are setting rules, policies, and culture in a lot of ways, and then individual contributors, let's say. Um, and these middle managers then have to adhere to the rules and policies, but they are the ones in those personal one-on-one conversations with people who may be of a different race than them. And that can be tricky at face value. So I wonder, what can somebody who's in middle management do when the culture that they're serving in their job is contrary to their values?
Yeah. Ugh.
Just an
Ugh.
easy one.
I mean, so I just have to sit with this for a second because I really empathize with people for whom the Venn diagram of their company values and their personal values is like all the
Yeah.
way like off. I mean, just believe me when I say I get it. Um, And something that I think is important for middle managers is to remember that you are always creating a culture on your team. And that can be a really effective buffer from all of the other stuff that might be happening within your organization. Um,
Mm.
and so there are everyday things that managers do that can move the needle for a person's feeling of inclusion, right? So, for example, I had a baby while I was also working on this baby. And I was on maternity leave and I came back from maternity leave to an email from my boss that said, "Hey, so glad to have you back. Um, Next week, we're having our team retreat in Chicago. So make sure to book your flight and see you there. And we'll talk in our one-on-one next week." And I was like, my kid is 3.5 months old. And at that point, she literally was not like she was rejecting bottles. And she only was nursing. It was very different from the experience I had with my first kid. And so I was like, I can't, first of all, like it's wild, right? But like, what? Um, and later on, I had a conversation with that manager who said, "Well, but it all worked out, right? Because you told me that you weren't going to be able to go, and I made a way for you to have, to join virtually, and it was fine." And what
Mm.
I contested, not to her, but to HR, is that making me have to say, as the person who had just come back from having a baby with 3.5 months of postpartum and a whole raging amount of postpartum anxiety happening, to advocate for myself in that way was unnecessary. If all she had done was to recognize, like, the email could have been, "Hey, welcome back. Wanted to let you know there is a team offsite happening. We've set it up so that you can join virtually. If you really want to come to Chicago, like, cool. But, want to make sure that you don't have to. It's your choice, what have you, right? Like, and so that is an example of what a manager's discretion looks like at
Mhm.
directly influencing my experience. And there are so many other examples of that when it comes to what middle managers can do, regardless of what the culture of an organization is. You can decide that you're reading this book and you want to make sure that your team understands that they feel safe and that you're going to hold people accountable for macro and microaggressions and that you are going to be open to feedback. So when you do or say something inevitably that doesn't land well, you're okay with people bringing you that feedback and you're not going to be defensive. You're going to sit with it. You're going to apologize. You're going to do better, right? Those are choices that you can make regardless of what the organization does or does not do. And then I would also say, there are lots of ways to resist, and sometimes sticking around in an organization and being that beacon of light for others is really, really valuable. And sometimes resistance also means you leave and
Mhm.
and you find a place that aligns with your values. And I just have to say that because I have been in both kind of buckets of that experience, and they're draining in different ways for different reasons. But yeah,
Yeah, you're naming so much here about managers being number one proactive in their interactions with folks and are if they are informed and learned and have read your book and others, it gives them at least a little repertoire of like, here are moments when I might need to go to bat
yeah,
earlier for someone. And I think you're totally right that if it was, well, anyway, there's a lot to be said about that
yeah.
example. um,
I know. Super chill.
wowie, wowie. Okay, so another thing that is really hard for managers is to get over the idea of being liked. Like
Yeah.
people are not really fans of conflict, and people really want to take home the like best boss, always was so sweet to me, mug. So if that's already human condition, and now we're going to add the notion of maybe getting it wrong when giving that feedback about like something that might have been biased or racist even, what do you got? How do we
Yeah.
all chill out a little bit with being perfect?
Yeah. Gotta have a growth mindset, Jen.
Mm,
Gotta have a growth mindset. So growth mindset is a concept that was developed, unearthed by social psychologist Carol Dweck in like the late 80s. And basically, what her like the first studies on this showed that there is a spectrum of how people think about where intelligence comes from. Some people think that intelligence is innate. You either have it or you don't. And other people think that there is some, kind of like starting ground for intelligence, but over time you can grow your skills and intelligence with effort, etc. And what basically her research and then others have found is that you can apply a growth mindset to about anything under the sun. And it's
mm,
really transformative. So when you have a fixed mindset, this belief that whatever skill or talent you have, like whatever that amount is, that's it makes you really react really negatively to critical feedback because that critical
mm,
feedback is proof positive that you don't have it. You have reached your ceiling. And so it
mm,
actually makes you react more defensively and it also makes you avoid that concept or activity or discussion because you're like I'm bad at it and I can't get any better. A growth mindset by contrast helps protect that or prevent that kind of avoidance because you believe that there is room for improvement. And so, in fact, whereas critical feedback and positive feedback, but critical feedback isn't as threatening because it's not proof
mm,
positive that you don't have it. It's a sign that you don't have it yet. And the best
mm,
critical feedback is actually one, the kind that tells you how to get to the better outcome. And so there is research on how having a growth mindset about bias can be transformative for conversations about bias. And what research shows is that people who have more of a growth mindset about racial bias are more receptive to feedback that tells them that they have biases. They're more interested in engaging in discussions and learning opportunities that are going to teach them how to rid themselves of their biases or manage them at the very least, right? And so it also helps relieve that the psychological and the physiological threat that comes when you encounter that information. And there's also other research that shows that a growth mindset and also intrinsic motivation can be helpful. And so again, you have that feeling of why am I doing this? And so if you tell me that I did something that is biased and I believe that that is a label that you have just slapped on my face and now I'm not going to be able to remove it, I want to hide. I
mhm.
feel ashamed. I might get angry at you for making me feel this way. I probably don't want to talk to you again. I certainly don't want to talk about this, topic or racism. But if I have a growth mindset and you tell me this, I might feel still a little prickly, right? But I also then, if I'm intrinsically motivated, can say, okay, this doesn't feel great, but I'm not doing this because it feels great. I'm doing this
Mm,
because I believe that it's important to
mm,
create an environment where my team members can thrive and do their best work. I'm doing this because I believe the way to get that best manager, mug or accolade is by creating an environment where people can be authentic with me and let me know when I've made mistakes. Because that psychological safety that I'm creating is more important than my own ego. And that is how you allow yourself to kind of manage through that feeling. So, a growth mindset and
mhm.
intrinsic motivation are the keys for managing everything around discomfort. And it is also, because of that, why chapter one in my book is about a growth mindset about bias, and chapter two in my book is about managing discomfort and intrinsic motivation. Before we get into any of the other stuff, we got to work on the
Mhm.
psychological foundation that is going to allow you to hear what comes next.
I mean, you're making me think so much of, well, two things. The first is, I don't know if you've heard it, but this phrase, like, you are a combination of the five people you spend the most time with.
Woo!
I know
Now I'm like,
everyone just passed out of complete, I
do my
can't tell.
kids count?
Either,
Because I
yeah,
like I spend a lot of
right.
time
They're
around.
hard. They're hard. I agree. Like maybe like 0.25 per kid.
Yeah,
I don't know. It depends on the age, maybe.
yeah.
Anyway, that's its own nutshell. But
Wow.
if I think that's one thing to think about, which is like who is influencing me? Is it people who only like to be liked, at which point maybe I'm that's sort of rubbing off on me a little bit?
Mm,
Or is it people who make some bold stands or who can have a harder conversation and that's being modeled for me? The other thing, let me think if I can remember the other thing because you said so much good stuff. Yeah, the other thing is, that whole you are what you eat and you are what you consume and what you
yeah.
read and what stupid shit you look at online and whatever. So like this is like here's your whole grain, I don't even know, tofu or whatever, like, right? This is like healthy stuff. Like, so what can I be adding to my mind? Like, right, that this book certainly falls in line with that. I want to be healthy, intentional, and have this intrinsic desire to do better, be better and do better. Than by nature of you consuming this stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
there's going to be some
absolutely.
growth there. Yeah.
I also really like I mean, so one of my favorite things about when I was working with you as my coach is you had the like little postcards that you would send. I was like, you said a really smart thing. And it literally would just be like a quote that I said and, send it to me
There are
randomly. And
many.
I still have those. But man, I need to give you a postcard, Jen Dary, because like yeah, you are the sum of the five people you spend the most time with. So I'm literally now, this is probably why I can, sing Golden and recite the
Oh,
words from Tangled, because my kid, but wow, yeah, that's really powerful. But yes, I,
yep.
I really, to that end, I am very fortunate that I have a lot of people in my life who engage in this process of self-reflection. One of my friends who is on here, she and I go on walks. We used to go on walks daily, and now, life. I'm doing a full-time job. But we regularly will, like go on a walk and then afterward be like, hey, I think I said a thing that didn't
Mm,
really land, or like, I don't feel great about this, or I was thinking more about whatever. And I really appreciate that. And the, the self-reflection and just like self-awareness and
yeah.
the care for the impact that we have on others is something that lots of the people in my life really value. And so, yeah, I think that that's really important. If you spend a lot of time around managers who are just interested in, you know, uh, getting public praise for being a good manager, that will show up. And sometimes, and I think public praise is wonderful, but to me, I want to know that I'm having an impact on people in the big and in the quiet moments. And sometimes those quiet moments are the times where you hold a norm and it's hard,
Mhm.
but that's the thing that somebody remembers for the rest of their life.
Yeah, holding a norm, holding accountability, and that, of course, is in this conversation, we're talking about bias and maybe people's interactions there, but it also can be quality of work and performance, and that, that low bar is whatever the manager is allowing to exist, and that, sort of informs the culture of the rest of the team. Okay, I have one more question, and then
Okay.
if other folks want to start like dumping them in there, I don't know, this is like way
Yeah.
too multisensory to be like reading and listening, so I've mostly been listening. But if you have a question, dump it in there, and we'll get to it. Okay, so I was so glad to get your book because I feel like something that has been in my brain for the last couple years, at least, is the relationship between intuition and bias.
Yeah.
And by this, I mean that I feel like I'm a very intuitive person. I'm good with people. I can read a room, and intuition is definitely one of my values. But can I trust my intuition? Like, is my intuition biased by the nature of that I'm a white woman? Um, like, is any part of me not biased as deep as, like, how deep can I
Yeah.
go? Anyway, this is
Yeah.
like the philosophical
Yeah.
banger of the last
Yeah.
question.
So I will answer this question in a way that relates to something that we both have in common as parents, right? As moms. And something that I remember being told by my doula, shout out to doulas, um, when I was just like spiraling in the few days after my first daughter was born. She was like, Evelyn, people who care this as much as you do about being a good parent
Mm,
are good parents, right? Like, so
mm,
I think that one of the things that I really appreciate about the audiences that have found my book is like if you are picking up a book like mine, there is already some part of you that is wanting to figure out how to constantly be better and how to constantly address your biases and be aware of them. So I do want to like affirm you in that. And also, of course you have bias. Like we all do, and I'm constantly like coming up against like, oh, I gotta so you know, there is that. On the question of intuition, though, I like to think about our intuition as the kind of going back to what you were saying about, you know, kind of we are the sum of who we are, the five people we spend our time around. Your intuition is informed by the inputs that we have from our upbringing, from our current circumstances, from the books that we're reading, the podcasts listening to, as Meg is saying, the folks we follow on
Mhm.
social media. And so I would say if your intuition is informed by a diverse set of influences, your
Mm.
intuition is more accurate or valuable than someone's intuition who is informed only by homogenous sources.
Mm.
That said, we should always be questioning why we feel something and what we feel and the impact of those decisions and using that to calibrate accordingly. So, for example, if I am interviewing somebody for a job on my team, and I'm like, oh, I just like really am vibing with this person. Like, wow, I really like them, whatever. Um, Maybe I like them because they speak quickly, like I do. Maybe I like them because they are also a badass Black woman. Maybe I like them because they are, Midwestern transplants on the West Coast. There could be any number of reasons that I am connecting with them that have nothing to do with their capability to do the job and have everything to do with my projecting my, likeness onto them. That's not good intuition. And so for that, I need to have uh, a structure that is going to allow me to parse out my intuition from the like clear evaluative nature of the interview that will allow me to figure out whether this person can do the job or not, right? So I think for everything, think about the inputs so that you
Mhm.
can inform your intuition with a broader range of things to draw on. And as you are guided by that intuition, pause and wonder, what is it that is making me make this decision or not? Am I okay with the outcome of it? If yes, proceed. If no, try again.
Mhm. Yeah, that whole gut about, or when I was asking about like middle managers as sandwiches, like I think there is definitely like a question of safety and your intuition of like, this is a conversation I want to have privately with someone who just said that out loud in the room, or this is something I can bring up in a group of people if I'm hearing bias. There's also, it's like just a big old mess, right? It's like sort of ethically, I want to be the person that calls them out publicly. My safety as whatever your personality is in the room tells me that like there's gonna be other problems to pay for after that. So yeah, I just think it's all very, I don't know, complex, I guess, but that is really very helpful.
And that's where like
All right,
you're
yeah,
never
sorry.
gonna get it all right. I would just say like you're never gonna get
Yeah.
it. And so in the example of like, my intuition, I'm not sure if I should be saying something publicly in the group or privately, whatever. Like you might get it wrong and but having a growth mindset, and as a leader I actually tell them when I'm doing
Mm,
manager trainings, I tell them like, when you leave this workshop on inclusive behaviors or whatnot, tell your team that you went to the workshop, not so that you can be
yeah,
like, I got a badge from Dr. Evelyn Carter that says I am inclusive, but so that you can tell them like,
yeah,
one of the things that I learned is that I have to be very explicit with you all about how much it is important to me to create a space that really does work for everyone, particularly people from underrepresented or marginalized groups. What that means is that I want you to tell me when I am missing the mark, and I am going to try my hardest to create that space proactively, and so that you don't have to always be telling me like, everyone get it together. And
yeah.
letting your team know I am working on this opens the door for them to say thank you, and also just this way, right? So
Hmm.
again, that growth mindset allows you to accept feedback, but it also makes people more willing to give it to you when your intuition might not have been the right outcome, led to the right outcome.
Yeah, I always tell clients that that's like a gift to your future self. If you tell
Yeah.
everybody right now, hey, I took a training, I'm working on this, I'm gonna call it out more, then one day when either your report has to share something with you or when you actually do have to sort of step in, then you're like, okay, phew, I set that
Yeah.
I
And
set
then you
that
got to live up
expectation
to it.
earlier.
Like live
And
up
then you
to
have
it.
to do the
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we got a couple questions.
Yeah.
Kate, hi Kate. Question: There are very real consequences for companies now that actively pursue robust and overt DEI policies. While I've argued that the longer term consequences are more significant, this has been less successful. We are now looking at more of what I call a partnership approach, partnering DEI and race based initiatives with things like worker fairness broadly. Or to your example, Christian values. Is this a legitimate way to approach continuing the work? Hmm.
Yes. Next question. Just kidding. Um, yes, it is legitimate in that you've got to figure out what entry point is going to work. And so, I was talking to someone yesterday and they were saying, I'm going to give people their vegetables, but I'll sneak it in the pasta sauce, right? Again,
Mm.
I really am by the way, you can see the influence of my 3-year-old and my 1-year-old on me in this conversation. I am some of them. They are some of me. But I think that if you are working with folks who are, for whatever reason, bristling at the idea of DEI policies and programs, of which there are many, um, maybe the approach that is working for this organization, for your organization, or the people you're talking to, is to talk about, well, we care about fairness. We
Mm.
care um, about the world being safe for everyone. And if you are truly using that to slide in the vegetables of, and here's how we are going to do these race-based, equity-based practices, like, great, cool, cool, cool. Um, that doesn't have to, and it should not be the strategy for every organization, though. And so this is where I say, is it a legitimate approach? Absolutely. Is it the one, the only one? Absolutely not. And in fact, it
Mhm.
will not be effective for other organizations. There are some organizations that I work with that are that that don't need the vegetables to be hidden. And if I were to go in there and have the hidden pasta sauce vegetables approach with them, I would not be effective because that's not what they need. So that's where figuring out, like, how do I understand the culture and the context of the organization or of the group or of the person, like what's going to resonate with them, and how do I speak that language, but recognize that that language will be different. I will also just add to back up. I can't believe I haven't cited any studies this entire conversation. That is so unlike me. So here's one.
I know, I'm
There's
shocked.
research looking at, I don't remember the citation, it was in 2015, but the main study was basically looking at people who identified as more liberal or more conservative and trying to get people on either side of the aisle to convince the other group about something that was very important to them. So for conservatives, the instruction was convince a liberal person that English should be the only language that we use in America. I think that was what the prompt was. And then for liberal, it was convince somebody on the other side that, abortion, they should be pro-choice. And
Wow.
what the researchers wanted to look at was essentially what arguments did their participants write out and how many elements of the kind of quintessential liberal or conservative thinking emerged in those arguments. And what they found is that a small percentage of participants effectively communicated to the other side, meaning a liberal was far less likely to communicate to a conservative using conservative moral underpinnings and language,
Mm.
but that's what was going to be most effective. And the same thing was true for conservatives. And so I think about that research all the time when I'm communicating. I have my own beliefs. I believe that DEI work is important and that we should be combating racial inequity in all its forms. I also know that if I'm talking to someone who doesn't agree with me on that, I can't go in there and be like, well, let me
Mm.
tell you what, like, I've got to find a way, if I really want to get them to think differently, I've got to find a way to understand what's going to influence them and speak that language and also recognize that persistence is key. So,
Oh
short
my
answer,
gosh.
yes, it's a legitimate approach. And also, there are lots of other legitimate approaches as well.
You're so smart. What a
Thank
weird
you.
What a weird study. That sounds fascinating.
I know. Now I'm gonna
Um,
have to look it up because I want to make sure I'm citing it for you all because I just, somebody's gonna care.
oh my
So
God, somebody
stay tuned.
pour a glass of wine and read that shit. Okay. So, um, this is a question from Donna a little bit earlier. I think this is when you were talking about your manager
Yeah.
being like, bye, we're going to Chicago, come with us. Her question was what made that manager, so your manager about Chicago, what made what she did a racist thing versus just really insensitive in general? And maybe it was both. But
Oh yeah. Okay, so I should be clear that in that case, I was not speaking about her as an ex like that example was not one
mm,
where I was thinking about her as race. It was just like insensitive and just an example of like bad manager behavior.
yeah.
However, it does uphold racism in as much as a company that is mostly white and mostly male, there is a kind of dominant expectation there still is, about what success looks like. And that
Mm,
success aligns with the idea that as a white guy, like workplaces were really built for straight white heterosexual men who had, if they have kids, stay at home wives who were taking care of them. That is why they were able to be so successful because they got a partner who is at home doing all of the child rearing and mental labor and all of that. So like they can go and, the careers, which is why, by the way, as a woman in a heterosexual marriage, it is critical that I have a partner who is as committed to my success as I am, because without that, like literally the research shows, like I would be toast. Um,
mm,
and so, as a woman, as a Black woman, re-entering the work force after having a kid, my manager was upholding a white, dominant, and patriarchal society by not considering what I would need in order to be successful in that domain. So there is
mm.
racism everywhere, and my favorite party tricks is to talk about how like literally anything is racist. I'm really fun at parties, but I think that's a perfect example of how when we are doing things without consideration of the impact, especially if and when we are doing so in a way that is going to uphold a system of white dominance
Yeah.
and of a norm that suits how white people engage, that is racist. So, yes, it was in that way racist.
Okay. Let me just
Oh, yes, I love
see.
that. Great, Angie. I'm gonna
There's
let's collab on that game.
Does anybody else have a question that they want to throw out at the end? Because then I have one final. Okay. Well
I
then,
have like a
oh,
semantic
great.
question.
Angie, hello.
Yeah, hi. Can I say it verbally? Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Um,
Please do.
okay, my
Please do.
question, because you're so smart and
Oh my
academic and
God,
you're a
tell me
good
more.
writer and all the things. I have a question. Tell me your reasoning why you capitalized white.
Yes. Okay, so when I was in grad school, the American Psychological Association sixth edition reigned supreme. I do not even want to know what grad students these days, like what edition they're using. But there is a line in there that says that uh, lowercase like lowercase letters are for colors, and uppercase is for groups or racial, right? So like lowercase b
Mhm.
black is uh, a color, uppercase b black is a race. I also will just say as an aside, I'm struggling to figure out what that means with brown because brown really is more a descriptor than a race, at least
Mm,
here
mm,
in the US. So like I don't know, we'll see. Um, but so white is a race. If you are white,
mm,
you have a race. It's white. And I know that there are people, including Black activists, who feel differently about whether white should or should not be capitalized. And the reason that people say that it shouldn't be capitalized is because basically it connotes this idea of like groupiness that white people don't demonstrate. And I get that. But to me, I want white people to understand that they have a race in the same way that we do. Just because whiteness is the default or not talked about does not mean it's not a group. And that is why, both because lowercase is a color, uppercase is a group, and also because white is a race, that is why I capitalize the W in white.
mm. Okay, last question on the way out. What gives you hope right now? Because
My
there's a
kids,
lot of not hope.
my kids, always.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
I just, I, I will just quickly say that there was a post. I have a lot of people in my life who chose not to have children for a variety of reasons. And whenever there are people who are like, ugh, like I could never have a child right now. Like there's never been a worse time in history to have children. I remember there was a Black woman that I follow on Threads who was like, really? Never in history? There's never been a worse time to have children? As a Black woman? False. Like false. So one, like I am bringing children into this world that like truly I can raise them in the image of what I hope our world can be. But also they give me hope because they pull me from the macro forces to like what is happening right in their world. And like for my
Yeah.
daughter, I can be worried about all the things that are going on out in the world, but then she needs me to stop what I am doing and dance with her to Golden and jump up and down. And I that literally fills my cup. And so yes, my children give me hope.
Oh, well, everyone, wipe away the tears. The children are the future.
I believe
Somehow
the
we'll get
children
there.
are our future. I
And
wanted to
now
sing that in my
karaoke.
book, but I couldn't because copyright.
Well, that's how they get you.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. I will be a responsible moderator and tell you thank you for coming for 60 minutes. Evelyn Carter, you're the
Thank
best. I feel
you.
so glad to have given you the time to share with us about your book. And everybody, I will send this recording for those of you who are not able to make it. And please feel free to share with your friends and go buy her book or like 50 copies for your company.
Hey.
She's available.
Bye. Thank you all.